G'day Gear Junkies, Jason here. A question that I get asked from time to time is, why did I buy the 68 Deluxe Reverb reissue instead of the 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue? Or an easier way to describe these two is, why did I buy the silver panel version over the black panel version, which is more famous? Well, there were a few reasons, and I did a fair bit of research before buying the silver face, and I can tell you that money wasn't really the issue. It was only $100 more to get the black panel, but I specifically chose to get the 68 over the 65. In this video, I'm going to explain why I specifically chose the silver panel over the black panel, and maybe answer the questions, do I regret my decision? And if I was buying this amplifier again today, would I still go for the silver panel over the black panel? But before I go too far, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. And if you want to support this channel, you can go to the Middle Age Gear Junkie store and purchase some merchandise, or you could support me through Patreon, where I'm uploading additional content. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank people who have been supporting me. I'm seeing a lot more t-shirt sales lately, and I would like to thank you guys a lot for that support. Back in 2018, I was really getting into pedals, and I decided that I needed a better clean platform amplifier to better showcase some of these pedals that I was buying. So I tried a few different models, and the one that stood out to me the most was the Fender Deluxe Reverb reissues. Now, at the time, there were two available in my price range, which were the 65 black panel reissue and the 68 silver panel reissue. Now, these two amps are fairly similar. They're both 22 watts. They both have four 12AX7 preamp tubes and two 6V6 power amp tubes. But there were some key differences between them, other than obviously the aesthetics. Both amps have two channels. On the black panel, they are labeled normal and vibrato. Both of these channels have the bright cap hardwired on. The difference between the two channels is that the vibrato channel has access to both the reverb and tremolo, and the normal channel does not. On the silver face, the channels are labeled vintage and custom. The vintage channel is exactly the same as the vibrato channel on the 65. However, the custom channel is a little bit different. It has the tone stack of a Bassman amplifier. So the treble and bass come from a Bassman amplifier, so they sound a little bit different. Also, they've reduced the amount of negative feedback on this channel, which means that it breaks up at slightly lower volume. You can use both the reverb and the tremolo on the custom channel, whereas you couldn't do that on the normal channel of the 65. This means I can set up my amplifier with two very different clean tones, and this is a big reason why I chose the 68 over the 65. So now I'm going to play a few examples back to back through both channels using drive and clean, so that you can hear the difference between the two channels. I'm plugged into both channels, and I'm going to switch between them using a passive AB box. My favorite guitar to use when I'm playing through this amplifier is my Deluxe Stratocaster. Now, I think that the vintage channel particularly is beautifully voiced for using the neck pickup on a Strat. I think that it has a bell-like quality. It's got plenty of bottom end. It's beautiful and round without being flubby, but also has all the definition up top. So I'm going to play an example now where I'm going to switch between the two channels while playing the same example. When I'm playing through the bridge pickup on this guitar, I actually prefer the Bassman channel, because with that bright cap on the vintage channel, it's just way too bright and ice picky. It's also very thin. It's not a very nice sound. However, when I change it to the Bassman channel, it's warmer in the bottom end, and we don't have as much of that brightness up top. So it's actually a much more pleasant sound. And this is amplified even more when I use it with drive. As you would expect from a Deluxe Reverb, it's got a spring reverb tank. It's actually a little bit dark sounding. I don't use it that often, so I've just turned it up for this example. So it's quite mellow sounding, which is kind of cool, I suppose, but I don't use it that often because I can't really control it. I usually use a Strymon Big Sky. My favourite overdrive to pair with this guitar and amp combination is the Marshall Bluesbreaker. It's a very light overdrive, but it just sounds so natural, but it also preserves all of those sort of upper mid frequencies that brings out a lot of definition, which I tend to really like. Clone style pedals, which are also very popular with this style of amplifier, I find them to be beautiful and warm, but they're not quite as defined. Now, because I started playing on acoustic guitar, I actually use my fingers to play a lot when I'm using a clean sound or a slightly overdriven sound. So I actually prefer using the Bluesbreaker for this application. You could hear there the difference between the two channels. The Bassman was a lot more warm and probably more pleasant in the room. However, if I was playing with a vocalist and a bassist and maybe a drummer, the vintage one is what's really going to stand out. Now, some of my favorite pedal combinations is to use the Bluesbreaker with a tube screamer in front of it and or the Boss CS2 compressor as well. This guitar amp combination is my favourite for using chorus, particularly on the neck and middle position on the Strat. It just sounds absolutely beautiful. If you know anything about the Dumble Steel String Singer amplifier, it's kind of like a Fender tone on steroids. Now you can kind of emulate this by using an EQ pedal in front of it. That enhanced clean sound works really well with a big modulated reverb. And I used a sound like this a couple of weeks ago for Halloween. I put out a YouTube short called Hauntingly Beautiful Spider's Web. So if you missed that, this is what it sounded like. Although I don't use the bridge pickup on this guitar very often with this amplifier, one of the sounds that I do use it for and that I do like is when I pair it with the Zendrive Black Magic, which is kind of like a high gain dumble tone. I then hit the front of that with a tube screamer as well to give it more saturation, more compression, and just further enhance that in mid-range. I find this tone sounds fantastic with humbuckers as well. My next favourite guitar to play with the Fender Deluxe is my standard Telecaster. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, you're just a Fender guy, you're just biased towards Fender. No, I just think that single coil guitars through this amp, the way it's voiced, just sounds particularly good. You can use it with humbuckers, and I have come up with some good sounds using humbuckers, but I just have found that I have a tendency to lean towards single coils when I'm using this amplifier. Now, the vibrato channel gives us a really nice optical trem. But usually when I'm playing the Telecaster through the Deluxe Reverb, I'm using some kind of overdrive. My favorite overdrive to use with this guitar amp combination is the Past Effects Camber Drive, because I think that it works really well on the bridge pickup and it gives me all the definition in my chords. It's just a terrific overdrive. Now, if I change the channels, it'll be probably a little bit thicker because it has more bottom end on the other channel, but also I'll lose some of that sparkle on top. I also like to use a tube screamer in front of the camber drive to give it a bit of a boost, but also rolls off some of that top end, which makes it better for lead work. If I ever had a signature pedal, it would probably be this, a tube screamer going into something like the camber drive. This was the exact tone that I used for the solo in my song, She Just Wants to Dance. Another drive combination I like to use, especially with this guitar, is a Klon style overdrive going into the Zendrive Black Magic. The Zendrive is a very smooth overdrive, but the Klon helps to just give it a bit of raspiness and make it cut through a little bit more. Now, I mainly use this amplifier as a clean platform, but I understand that a lot of you guys might want to use an amp like this on the edge of breakup. So I've been running it at about 2.5. So I'm going to turn up to about 5, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is incredibly loud. And as you'll hear with my playing, it's very, very tentative because it's just so loud in the room. Now, the recording you just heard didn't sound very loud, but I had to set the microphone preamps to -20 dB just to do that. So it is incredibly loud in the room. In the room, I found the Bassman tone to be more pleasant because it's just a bit beefier and really punchy. I found that the vintage channel was just a bit too spiky in the top end, and that would probably be because of the bright cap. So if I was going to crank this amp right up and get it to on the edge of breakup, I'd probably be doing that on the Bassman channel. Another big difference between these two amplifiers is the speaker. The 65 black panel comes with a Jensen C12K speaker, while the silver panel comes with a Celestion V-Type. Now, I have a Celestion V-Type in my Marshall DSL-40, and I don't really like it. I think it sounds a bit fizzy. But with the Fender, it has a really beautiful round bell-like quality to it that I really, really enjoy with that particular amplifier. And having tried the Jensen, I found it a little bit flubbier in the bottom end than the Celestion, which I just found to be a little bit tighter. But it's easy to swap these out or even buy an extension cab to run with this amplifier if it's that big an issue for you. Another difference between these two amplifiers is where they're made. The black panel versions are assembled in USA and the silver panel in Mexico. They're both made using a printed circuit board. However, they do have another version called the 64 Deluxe Reverb, which looks like the 65, but it's hand wired using point-to-point soldered components. Now, I've seen shootouts between the 65 and 68, and they sound almost exactly the same on the vintage/bright channels. However, the 64 hand wired version is noticeably different. It is just got another level of clarity and spank in that top end that really makes it stand out from the other two, but it is a fair bit more expensive. Since I bought this amplifier, Fender have also released the Tone Master range, which are digital versions of their classic amplifiers like the Princeton, the Deluxe, and the Twin. And from all accounts, they are very, very good. I have a friend who owns a Tone Master Princeton and absolutely loves it. Now, with this amplifier, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. When I first bought it 7 years ago, I did a video about it, and I got several comments from people asking me if I had any problems with any background noise. At the time I didn't because it was brand new, but over time it started to develop a hum, buzz, and most recently crackling sounds, which rendered the thing unusable. There's a reason why I haven't used it in many demos recently, and that's because I had to get it serviced for the second time this year to get rid of a really bad crackling sound that it was making. It turned out to be a faulty tube, and it's now working well again. However, when you consider that I've had this thing serviced 3 or 4 times in the 7 years that I've owned it, that's not particularly good when you consider that I've never gigged with it. Now, my solo head back there, I did a couple of 100 gigs and God knows how many practices with that amplifier. I've owned it for 25 years, and it's never been serviced since I've owned it. The thing's built like a tank. So looking back on it now, did I make the right choice? And if I could go back, would I change to the 65? And the answer to that is no, I wouldn't. I'm quite happy with the 68. I really like the fact that it's got a completely different tone stack in the other channel. Although I don't use it that often, I like that option being there. Now, it's a lot easier to change the speaker out. Just say if you wanted the Jensen speaker, it's a lot easier to change the speaker out than it would be to change the tone stack out if you wanted to change the second channel. So I think you're better off getting the 68 Deluxe and just changing the speaker if that's what you want to do. I personally am very satisfied with the Celestion V-Type in this amplifier. I think it sounds quite good. However, if I had the choice between this and the 64 hand-wired version, that's a different story. I would definitely go with the hand-wired version because the demos I've heard of it back-to-back with this amplifier, it's just on another level. It sounded a bit like this amplifier did when I put the EQ pedal with it. It just had more. It was the Fender tone, but just almost like it had a blanket lifted off it. It was just so pristine. So yeah, maybe one day I'll get one of those. Who knows? It's not really a priority, but for now, I'm still happy with the 68. It's not perfect, but I do love it. So what do you think? Leave a comment below. Tell me if you own one of these amplifiers or you're looking to buy one of these amplifiers or the sorts of tones that you like to get from them. Like I said, they're very versatile. It's probably the amplifier I go to more often than not because I can just get so many different sounds through my pedal board with this amplifier. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you want to support this channel, you can go to the Middle Age Gear Junkie store and purchase some merchandise, or you can also support me through Patreon, where I'm uploading additional content. Other than that, my name is Jason. Have a wonderful day. See you later.